The United States is igniting a multi-billion-dollar civilian nuclear agreement with Saudi Arabia. For non-proliferation experts, these specific terms are setting off massive alarms. This initiative, championed by the Trump administration, aims to help Saudi Arabia build out a comprehensive civilian nuclear infrastructure. Historically, the U.S. insists on what is known as the gold standard for these partnerships. In the 2009 UAE deal, the UAE legally agreed to never enrich uranium on their own soil, ensuring they could never secretly build a weapon. But Saudi Arabia flatly refused those conditions. In a major shift, the U.S. conceded, drafting an agreement that leaves the door open for the Saudis to enrich uranium inside their own borders. The deal also omits the International Atomic Energy Agency's additional protocol, the regulation that allows international inspectors to conduct unannounced surprise visits to any suspicious nuclear site. By sidestepping the gold standard and scaling back inspector protocols, the U.S. is swapping its established non-proliferation playbook for a partnership built on diplomatic trust. This agreement sits in the middle of a decades-long proxy war. Across the Middle East, Saudi Arabia and Iran have been locked in a struggle for dominance, with conflicts stretching from Yemen to Iraq. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has even made the stakes public. If Iran successfully builds a nuclear bomb, Saudi Arabia will immediately follow suit. It is a strange backdrop for a nuclear partnership. The U.S. is providing the raw capabilities of nuclear infrastructure to a nation that has openly promised to join an arms race if provoked. Introducing massive nuclear infrastructure into this tense environment risks destabilizing the Middle Eastern security apparatus for years to come. To understand why scientists are worried, we must look at the mechanics of uranium enrichment. Allowing a country to enrich its own uranium is the most sensitive concession in nuclear diplomacy. This animated diagram shows the math. To power a civilian nuclear reactor for electricity, you only need low-enriched uranium, typically refined to around 3 to 5%. But to build a nuclear weapon, the gauge scales all the way up to roughly 90% enrichment. Here is the core technical threat. The machines to reach 5 and 90% are exactly the same. They are centrifuges, the silver cylinder seen here. Building a bomb simply requires running these identical machines for a longer period of time. By authorizing domestic enrichment infrastructure, the U.S. shortens the technical journey required to build a bomb, should Saudi Arabia ever decide to deviate from the agreement. The U.S. is largely motivated by the fear of a vacuum. American officials believe that if they don't secure this contract, China will step in to expand its own influence in the Middle East. Russia is also actively courting these Middle Eastern nuclear deals, putting pressure on Washington to maintain its historical monopoly on regional security contracts. Saudi Arabia has its economic goal under Vision 2030. They want nuclear power for their domestic grid to stop burning their own oil for electricity, allowing them to export more crude oil for profit. Politically, both sides get exactly what they want. On paper, it looks like a recipe for a nuclear buildup, until you read the fine print. Hidden within the framework of this agreement is a strict black box stipulation that changes the immediate threat level. If enrichment is ever approved, American companies will build and operate the plants on Saudi soil, entirely independent of the Saudi government. There will be zero technology transfer. Saudi scientists and engineers will not learn how to operate centrifuges or manage the enrichment process themselves. Even with enriched uranium, massive technical hurdles remain. Saudi Arabia currently lacks the infrastructure to design functional explosive systems or conduct the necessary weapons testing. The deal provides Saudi Arabia with the final product, electricity, but strictly denies them the recipe for nuclear independence. Because of these limits, experts view this as a hollow deal for now, the equivalent of buying an electric car without the battery. The timeline is also measured in decades. Designing and building these facilities will take 15 to 20 years before they become operational. In the short term, this is a domestic PR victory for MBS to project independence, while middlemen collect massive commissions on the required studies and construction. However, because the deal must pass through the U.S. Congress to become binding law, it carries a level of bureaucratic permanence that future presidents will find difficult to reverse. Technical and legislative barriers ensure a Saudi weapon remains a distant prospect. But this multi-billion-dollar agreement permanently lowers the guardrails of nuclear safety in a region defined by its volatility.